Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Ask Shivani LinkedIn Live. Today, we're going to speak about a really important topic that is affecting so many of the business owners and entrepreneurs and leaders in our businesses. And a lot of this conversation is about how much burnout is happening, what can we do to prevent it, and can we see the signs and symptoms? The other thing that I want to do in this particular LinkedIn Live is I've been learning how to become a breathwork and meditation teacher. And I want to share with you a technique that is really been successful in terms of being able to calm the nervous system down. And when you feel that you have moments of burnout, and how to perhaps even build that into your daily practice. And I will lead you through that. We will do that for a couple of minutes this morning. If you missed that, and if you are here live on this, please put your questions in, and I will answer as many of those questions as we can over the next few minutes. So let's firstly talk about burnout, and let's talk about the definition of burnout, because there's a lot of people going, I'm feeling a bit burnt out, and use that almost as a statement when they're speaking to people. But let's actually look at what the official definition is. So the official definition by the Global Wellness Summit talks about that it's the state of physical exhaustion, but it can also be mental exhaustion, or it can be both, caused by the workplace stress or excessive work hours. So we're specifically here talking about burnout that's related to work, and it usually starts off slow. Sometimes we can't even see the symptoms of it till way down the track. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But it's until whenever it started, sometimes it comes on very fast, but for some people and most people, it comes on very slow and it builds up over time. And it's until that employee starts to experience feeling a lot of fatigue, feeling these feelings of defeat, detachment, perhaps even getting very cynical about it, and helplessness. So they tend to also feel less accomplished. That affects their self-esteem, and they also then start to feel a lot more, dissatisfied with their work in terms of what that happens. I have been there myself. There have been a couple of times when I worked in the corporate sector that I felt really, really burnt out. And when I look back upon that and reflect upon that, a lot of the time it was because I was doing extensive travel, just not enough rest, and very high workload. I've also felt that in running my own businesses. I certainly noticed that as I started to scale, when I went from that 5 employees where I knew absolutely everybody and all their details and their dog's name and their partner's name, and when the business then started to grow, particularly when I got past the 20 employees, there was still not enough resources to be able to do what I was trying to do. And I felt that a lot of the responsibility rested on my shoulders, which made it really difficult. So it's also really important to be able to, look for those signs and those symptoms that I spoke about, whether it's fatigue or cynicism or this feeling of, just the fact that I'm kind of giving up a little bit, and my satisfaction in what I'm doing and creating is reducing significantly. The other thing that I wanted to do is, the importance of preventing burnout is really important. There's some great research studies that have shown that, when we start to burn people out, it's not that they're going to have an extra day off or go on a week's holiday and that it's going to come back and they're going to be absolutely fine. Burnout can take a long time, and recovering from burnout can also take a long time. So what do we do as entrepreneurs and leaders in businesses to be able to prevent that? And as we head into the Christmas period, I must admit, having worked with many clients across different industries, and also in Australia, but also outside of Australia, one of the questions I've been asked a lot, particularly in the second half of this year, is, Shivani, I'm feeling pretty burnt out. I don't know what to do. I don't know what practices to have, but I feel exhausted. I think the cumulative effect of the pandemic and everything else is really starting to hit me now. And I've heard that repeatedly. I've heard that from men and women of different ages. I've heard them from different backgrounds, and as I said earlier, in different industries. So it's a really big issue in our businesses, and unfortunately it's here to stay. And we need to find ways in terms of being able to turn that and working out how we can help our employees do that. I read a fantastic article this week that a law firm in Melbourne is moving permanently to a 9-day fortnight. That 10th day will be a paid day. So they're not asking the employees to work extra hours, but they're going to make that as part of their retention strategy. And the reason behind it is that they were having high burnout, and also as a result of the high burnout, high number of resignations. People are starting to choose what their health and values are as we start to, face the other side of the pandemic, even though the pandemic is still around and lots of second and third waves of COVID are still occurring in many areas. So the question then, you may or may not be able to have a 10th day free. That might not be what you may be able to do, particularly if you run a small to medium-sized business, or you may work out that the cost of that is too great. But that is one strategy in organisations implemented just to prevent burnout, and as a result of that, increase their retention and also increase their productivity as a result of that. So really looking at what the cost of burnout might be in your business, even if you started to lose 2 or 3 key people, can have a really big detrimental impact on the outcomes and what you're actually trying to achieve. So let's talk about some tips now, and then I will take you through an exercise as well. What are some of the tips as leaders and entrepreneurs that we can do? The first is we can really have a look at how we manage the workload, and it's never going to be exactly equal amongst all the colleagues, especially at a particular level. But one of the behaviours I know that I've had, and a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs have, is that we tend to give work to the people that perform really well. So sometimes there's an imbalance in that workload, and sometimes that imbalance in workload can also be with things like the time frames and the deadlines that you've actually put in place as well. So you might need to really just review what the workload is, looking at some of those symptoms that I've been speaking about, and having that conversation with particularly your key people, just to say, hey, how's that workload going? What's happening? I've also been speaking to many leaders in the last couple of months, and there's this psychological thing about getting this thing done before Christmas. And my question and my challenge today is to ask that, does it really need, I know you want it done by Christmas, but does it really need to be done by Christmas? And if it could wait for the first week of January, or when this employee's back, or when the team's back, that might actually take some of that unnecessary stress away from where you're at. So prioritising the workload, what you expect the key employees to do, making sure that they've got really good timeframes is a really great way of preventing burnout. That's an area that comes up a lot, particularly when I'm working one-on-one or in group coaching with people. That comes up a lot in terms of unrealistic workload timeframes and the ability to expect people to keep on delivering at the same pace they might have been able to deliver in the past. The second tip that I wanted to talk about is to, as leaders and entrepreneurs, to prevent burnout, is to really encourage self-care of your employees. Well, self-care is a very big title. And so how do we break that down? So let me just talk about some really simple ways that you might be able to do that. First is to talk about self-care in your team meetings. Perhaps you might get your team to share one thing that they've done since the last meeting. Let's say it's a weekly meeting. One thing that they've done in the last week to have self-care. They don't need to be big things. They don't need to be going out for a big treatment for $300. It might be a walk that they've done. It might be the fact that they've had a bath. It might be the fact that they've read a book. So just asking them to share what's happening, or these conversations maybe one-on-one, when you are speaking to your key people and talking to them about what it is that they're doing for their self-care. This time of year also can become so busy. We are so socially busy. I look at our calendar, in our family, we have 2 birthdays. I have my husband's birthday. I have my daughter's birthday next week, and this is all before Christmas. This is all before end of year school events. And this is all before we're all trying to catch up with our family and friends as well. And so this time of year also gets very, very busy. And one of the things I say, that one of the best things that you can learn for self-care is the ability to say no. It is a learned skill. It's a practice. But as leaders, you can also ask them and talk about the fact that they are saying no. And even if that means that they don't come to every social event in the workplace at this time, but that is also okay. There's not this obligation that they won't be seen as a team player. And if they really need some self-care, if their diary is really full, maybe to stay for a little bit, or maybe have a chat to you and say, hey, I've got so many things going on, I may not be able to get to this particular event, but I can get to the other team meeting lunch, for example. The other thing about self-care is that there may be some ways where you could really look at what you are doing for Christmas. Now, for some of you, you've probably organised some of these events already and booked venues, etc., but also looking at doing some fun activities. One way to prevent burnout is to have a lot of fun. So around self-care, it doesn't always have to be, a food coma, as we call it in Australia, or alcohol infused, where we need to be there drinking all afternoon. That's not great for our mental wellness, and it sometimes is not great for our burnout. In fact, it does the opposite and has the opposite impact. So there are fun activities. I spoke to a team the other day, and they were going to do a after lunch activity and finish up a little bit later. And they were all going 10-pin bowling. And that was great. They were all really excited about it. They were all going to wear crazy Christmas shirts. They were all going to get a pizza. But they had a time limit of 3 hours for this Christmas party. So it was 1 to 4, and then they were going to send their employees early that day. So in the 3-hour time frame, by the time you've done bowling, got a pizza, perhaps a couple of drinks, you're not actually focusing and exacerbating the fact that you're asking people to stay all evening and keep drinking and eating. And I just thought that was great. And the leader that I spoke to there said that they were very conscious of burnout, very conscious of people's mental wellness, and they wanted to do something fun, social, but also that was really good for their health. After I go through the third tip that I have, I'm also going to take you through an exercise to really help you calm the nervous system down. The third thing that I wanted to suggest is doing what I call is a health check. I spoke about some of the symptoms that might occur, and let me just reiterate them. Sometimes those feelings, again, they're built over a long time when it comes to burnout. Maybe things like feeling a little bit helpless, maybe feeling like a failure at work, maybe feeling like a project didn't go your way and you feel defeat. You might be starting to get a bit detached in terms of, whatever happens, happens. And you might be trying to get some cynical. There are other physical parts as well. It can lead burnout in terms of, constant fatigue, feeling either sleeping a lot or not sleeping enough. And there's these feelings that I'm constantly working and I've got excessive work hours. And one of the things we know from research is just because you're working for that many hours does not actually mean that you are productive for that many hours. In fact, more than about a 7-hour day, 7.5-hour day, your productivity actually declines after that, even if you're at work for 12 or 13 hours. So really looking for that. So when we're doing a health check as leaders and entrepreneurs, what it looks like is starting to look for symptoms of that burnout. And it's not about just you noticing them. It's about encouraging and talking about this topic with your staff and saying to them, watch out for these symptoms. Watch out for the fact that we don't want you to burn out, not just because for work, but for your family and for your health and for your life outside of your work, and really get them to do that. If they're feeling a bit burnt out, one of the great things when we're doing a health check as a leader and entrepreneur is sometimes you just need to lend a listening ear. Sometimes you just need to listen to the fact that this person may be overwhelmed. Rather than jump at the solutions, just listen to them. You might have an employee assistance program, or you might have a link into a psychologist or a counsellor, and if they need some support, perhaps connecting them to some other resources. There's also some fantastic books. If you've got any questions on it, please shoot me an email, and I'd be so happy to be able to have a look at that and to be able to do that. Jason's just popped a question in, and he's just asked that I've raised this with staff before, but they haven't wanted to talk about it. Great question, Jason. That sometimes one of the things that occurs is that people don't want to talk about the burnout. They perhaps feel a bit embarrassed, or they're worried about judgment, or they perhaps are unaware and they don't actually want to be that. But the fact that you've raised it is fantastic. And I think it's great that you're actually having that conversation and wanting to talk about that. So, keep doing it with the same employee, with other employees. And if that still doesn't work, again, there's other strategies, but start to have a look at how you build that into your culture and how people can actually talk about that as well. So again, just going back to that health check, looking at how the ways that you can really link them into further support if they need, or you might just start to build that into your culture and perhaps be that listening ear. So the last thing I want to do on this LinkedIn Live is I've been learning how to be a meditation and breathwork teacher this year. And there's a technique that I've come across that I'm hoping will really help people that are feeling a little bit burnt out. And you can do this several times a day. I'm only going to take you these to go through for 2 minutes. I find that is a start from a breathwork perspective. That's all you actually need to be able to do. But if you want to do more, as I said, you can then do more. And this technique is called the 396 method. And what it is, it's often done at the beginning of the day, and often when you're starting to feel really stressed and feeling like burnout. And again, you could do it for 1 minute, but I'm going to do it for 2 minutes, and you could literally review and watch this together. But if you've got that very simple technique called 396, these are some of the benefits. It calms and stabilizes your nervous system. It also balances some of your energy points, and it helps you feel more grounded and centered, and it starts to harmonize the energetic body. So you can be sitting on the floor, you can be sitting in a chair like I am. It can be done anywhere. You don't have to form into a big yoga meditation pose. It can be done on the toilet seat. It can be done while you are cooking something. So just somewhere where you can do this technique. You don't have to have your eyes shut through it, but I find it really helps when you shut your eyes through it. So what you might want to do is, if you're starting to feel that burnout, sometimes it really helps if your head's really heavy, you can put your hands on your head. Or if you're feeling like you're a bit of a failure and nothing's mattered and your self-esteem's a bit low, you can put your hands on your heart, or you can just sit like I am. So what we're going to do is the 396 is we're going to breathe in for the count of 3. We're going to hold at the top of that third breath for the count of 9. And then we're going to exhale for the count of 6. Now, for some of you, that you'll find very easy to hold for 9. If you can't hold for 9, that is so okay. Hold it as long as it's comfortable. When it starts to become uncomfortable, just take an exhale. And what you'll find is over time when you do this practice, your strength will build. So let me just start my timer so you will actually hear it going off, and let's begin. So let's take a breathe in for the count of 3. Now let's hold at the top of that breath for the count of 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now let's breathe out for the count of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's as simple as that. Let's go again. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale for 6. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out for 6. Breathe in for 3. Hold. Exhale. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale. Only 20 seconds to go. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. And last one. Breathe in. Hold. And exhale for 6. Beautiful. Well done. Just notice what that felt like. Notice what you feel like now, and whether your nervous system is calm. And when we're holding our breath, we don't want to kind of tense everything up. We just want to hold it really gently, and then we want to be able to breathe it out. Now, you notice that I breathed in through my nose and out through my nose. That's the ideal practice, but if you need to get some little sip of air, you can always do that. So that's a really great technique. You can start it for a minute a day, that breathwork technique, to really learn to calm that nervous system down. You can do it several times. You can also do it in between. If you do a lot of Zoom meetings, you could also do that for a minute in between, just to really center and ground yourself, and it makes a really big difference. As we head into the end of the year, it's so important as leaders to really reflect on going, wow, everybody's going to have a fantastic break. We don't want our employees to go to their families, go to see their friends, their partners, their children, and be completely exhausted at this time of year. So see if you can incorporate some of the ways to prevent burnout of employees. If you've got any questions, I'm always here to answer that. And I hope that you have a fantastic Friday. Thanks for joining me.